Are you arguing for the moratorium, the banning of the march, rather than the rerouting of it?
I think that when it comes to the rerouting versus the moratorium, I guess the question is whether or not the rerouting will have the desired impact. I think particularly this week with the two marches, I think it's going to be difficult to reroute it in a way that avoids any of the synagogues. I think there's also the point which is every single time these protests happen, as I said before, they happen on a Saturday, they happen nearby synagogues. Those are choices.
If you rerouted them, they wouldn't have to be by the synagogue, would they?
Well, first of all, we've seen them. The question about the conditioning is the fact that on a previous occasion where conditions were put in place, the organisers breached those conditions. And
they were prosecuted.
Well, exactly, but that's evidence that the conditions may not work and may not be sufficient to deal with the issue based on the actions of the organisers. And the conditions could be used to move it, to change the timings and so on. But the point is that no matter when you do this on a Saturday in central London, on the routes that they are choosing, they are going to impact on synagogues. As I said, with the particular case of this weekend with the two marches, I think finding a route that doesn't impact any synagogues will be increasingly difficult. And the fact is, when it is a march and police resources are stretched out further, it will be much harder to deal with and show at the time the criminality in terms of incitement and incitement to hatred and the language that we see on those protests. For the police, that is much easier to police when it is a static assembly.
But the logic of that is to ban all pro-Palestine marches on Saturdays in London.
Firstly, I think there's a question as to why each time it is always scheduled at 12 o'clock on a Saturday nearby synagogues. Like, those are not always, but as I said, I think in 21 of the 33 cases, the police have said that they have imposed conditions around that. When it has been rerouted, or when synagogues have been in touch with the police to attempt to get it rerouted, there have been incredible pushback from the organisers towards those synagogues. In one case, a march which still went past the synagogue stopped for 8 minutes outside, with the chanting then held by the people still inside as it stopped outside the synagogue. When they are moved away, the pushback towards the police and towards those synagogues means, and towards those involved, just shows. I will turn the question back. Why, for the organisers, has it turned into such an important point that these go past synagogues? Why do they not work with the police to move it away? They've shown a complete disregard for this issue.
No, I see that completely, but this is why I'm not clear why you're arguing for a ban rather than a rerouting and that actually being properly policed. And surely it'll be hugely counterproductive if the Jewish community is seen to say banning these marches. And that's what you seem to be saying, and that worries me, because that's surely counterproductive. And Ms. Newman's, your line about free speech, how important that is, and how we must maximise that. If you're seen to be arguing to completely ban march on a Saturday in London, that surely goes too far and will be counterproductive.
I'm not sure not sure the ban is the same as a static protest.
Exactly.
A static protest is still a really, really significant opportunity for people to say what they want to say.
Yeah, you're still saying no. Your argument should be no marches on a Saturday in London which are pro-Palestine. Is that not?
There should be no marches on a Saturday in London which go either directly past synagogues or directly impact on the ability for Jews to attend synagogue. Yes, I'm very comfortable in saying that.
And that rerouting would achieve that?
It's possible. Unfortunately, we saw this weekend the police haven't done that. So there has to be questions to the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police and others as to why that hasn't happened this weekend. And if it is not possible to find a route, and I suggest particularly this weekend that is going to be incredibly difficult, then I don't think it is a restriction on freedom of speech to say ban it as a march, and then using Section 14 powers, condition it as a static assembly in a way where it will not have that impact. I think that's incredibly reasonable and protects the freedom of protest.
Rerouting is a possibility if the police use their powers. Otherwise, it sounds like you're just saying you can't march.
It's been used. There's a difference between accepting rerouting as a concept while recognising that it's difficult to work with the march organisers to do that because they want to go to past synagogues.
Yeah, and then there are criminal sanctions for that.
I think
they can be prosecuted. And your example was they had been prosecuted.
If I may, it's a bigger issue than just the immediate direct impact on this synagogue or that Jewish person who happens to cross the path. We are in a particular moment right now where anti-Jewish violence is at a level that has not been for decades, where the terrorist threat has been elevated, where the amount of policing and protective security that police and the Home Office feel is required for Jewish community is vastly, vastly increased. And racist violence, political violence, does not emerge from nowhere. Right? It is generated by, it is an expression of a much bigger hinterland of attitudes and ideas in which particular groups become demonized and dehumanized, and violence against them becomes normalized to the point where it's considered possible, and then it becomes possible. Now, these marches, of course, most of the people on the marches do not commit any crimes. Many of the people on the marches do not have any anti-Semitism or anything. But the marches as a whole have become a permissive environment in which anti-Semitism and extremist incitement are normalised. We have seen people chanting death to the IDF from the stage at these marches. We have seen people calling for resistance by any means necessary in huge banners on these marches. So in the current situation, I think it is reasonable that the balance between the rights of demonstrators to have their freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, and the rights of Jewish people to expect that protection from the state, I think that balance shifts a bit. That doesn't mean it shifts permanently, right? But I think right now, in the moment we're in, it is not unreasonable, as a way of just trying to dial down the temperature, that these marches don't carry on as they were before, for now.
And why do you think that rerouting, the organisers will ignore that banning the march, the organisers won't ignore that? Why do you think the legal sanctions work with regard to making it static, but not with rerouting?
Because, look, the incitement element, that danger applies wherever the march is, right? And the organisers do not help with it. And the police do what they can. Once a march is taking place, it is very difficult for them to go in and arrest people who are committing offences in that marches. If you've ever seen videos, footage of them trying to do it, it will take 20, 25 officers to arrest one person. Why? Because it takes 4 or 5 of them to arrest the individual, and the rest have to do crowd control, because as soon as they try and arrest someone for committing a racist offence, huge crowds will gather round and try and save that person and stop the arrest, rather than fellow marchers telling the people committing the offence, we don't want you here, go away, which never really happens as far as we can tell. So that is always in play. Now, yes, that will be in play whether it's a static assembly or a march, but I think the impact will be reduced. And I think the message it sends that these are events where extremist incitement happens, where it's normalised, that the organisers are at best complacent and reckless over that, and at worst complicit, and therefore it requires treating in a different way from all the other marches that go around the city all the time. I think that's an important message.